Hello lads and welcome back to the channel. My name is Scottish Koala and today we're discussing the latest naval forces test for War Thunder, which brought to the table something big. Very big. Destroy- cruisers! Let's take a little stroll back in time a year. Naval forces is looking glum. Not exactly as skilled as the aircraft or tank gameplay we have in the rest of the game. With only rapid-firing torpedo boats and river boats, it was called SPAA on water. These little ships didn't function well in a PvP environment because they weren't supported by their larger capital ship counterparts. See, a warship doesn't exist by itself. A warship is just one of many integral parts of a fleet. So, Gaijin caved and added destroyers into the game for us to test. They were an improvement over the arcade spam shooting SPA on water that we had, but had plenty of their own issues themselves. However, Gaijin said that they would not, under any circumstances, be going any larger than that. Destroyers were already a push, and we would not be seeing larger capital ships. So of course naturally welcome to some light cruiser gameplay. Yeah, you really screwed the pooch on that one, didn't you, Gaijin? Nonetheless, I am thrilled Gaijin has put cruisers into this weekend's naval tests, but they have plenty of issues. In arcade, this was some of the most fun I've had in War Thunder to date. In RB, yeah, not so much. These ships looked insanely good, well modelled, good attention to detail, and buzzing around the battle in a fighter was a lot of fun too. Now keep in mind, these were my first ever battles in War Thunder's naval forces. I was actually invited to join the cruisers test by Gaijin, so I'm very thankful for that. I'm a bit of a ship noob, the only things I have to go off being World of Warships and Battle Station specific, but nonetheless I was able to discern the good points from the good points being amazing and the bad points ranging from nitpicking to game breaking. Like I said, I had insane fun in arcade mode. Whether that was just coincidence in the way the matches worked out, I don't know. But even arcade mode had its faults, and realistic mode had a ton of them. First and foremost is the damage modelling. These so-called cruisers are no different to destroyers in the way that they function, they're just larger. They still have the issue of compartmentalised components, and this means that their survival or not is ridiculously unreliable. Sometimes a cruiser will sit there eating your shells for minutes while his team whittles away your modules, one by one. This seemingly indestructible cruiser meanwhile is sitting around pressing 6, 7 and 8 repeatedly, wondering what's even broken and whether or not he can do without it. And there's barely a chance of you hitting the 1 pixel of space that isn't blacked out yet to kill the guy because he's 4 kilometers away and your guns aren't nearly accurate enough, so you're relying on RNG. Then there's other times where you'll shoot the cruiser once and bang, hull break. The damage modelling still works on a case of destroying modules and compartments, which for the PT boats worked fine. The problem is that with these larger ships, the arcadiness, which is totally a word, is super easy to see. Because I can fire towards one side of these designated compartments and damage something 20 meters to the left, but something 3 meters to the right is completely untouched. Once a certain number of modules are downed, however, the ship is dead, regardless of what those modules were. Now I know this whole system exists to prevent you having to play find the last crew member, especially with slower firing shells firing at these massive vessels, but it's not exactly immersive, is it? The main reasons Gaijin originally didn't want capital ships at all is because if they were working off the damage models and mechanics that tanks do, they'd be very annoying to take out. But this feels half a step away from an HP system. The cruisers might as well just be destroyers that are easier to hit. There's no real uniqueness to how they function and how you engage them, and this is a shame, but I'm not really sure just how this could be fixed. There are several options, but I want you guys to comment with what you think should be done to diversify cruiser gameplay instead of the power from destroyers. Next up is the aiming system. This is an old one that's been in the naval forces since the beginning, but one that still permeates the game, especially in realistic mode. Shells don't converge, and the aiming reticule for the guns doesn't often follow the crosshair and go where you're pointing, and I seriously have no idea what those circles are trying to tell me. It's certainly not where the shells will land. I mean, where are these shells going? Into orbit? Is it to do with precision and accuracy? It seems to just be a random point somewhere near where you're aiming. You might as well not even have them. Use your crosshair, fire off ranging shots, and then slowly zero in on your target shot by shot. The circles just seem to be part of a static interface to help you triangulate the point where the shells end up at, which when you say it out loud sounds pretty cool, until you realise that the circles you're using as reference points don't actually represent anything dynamic and tangible. you might as well just draw a dot somewhere on your computer screen and use that as a reference. If these circles were reference points on the water's surface that would move and change size depending on how far away you aimed rather than the static decals on your screen that we have right now, you'd be able to use them reliably to range your shots, and they'd actually feel like they meant something. The accuracy needs to be worked on a ton. I mean, why do I have to aim over here to fire at something over there? How come I can fire a ranging shot, which goes long, adjust my aim almost a kilometer closer to my ship, and the shell still goes long and flies back to land in the exact same stretch of water like it's a fucking magnet? Aiming over and around islands was also a pain, as if a tree happened to come between you and your target, your shells would fire themselves into orbit, just like in tank battles when you go to fire directly at an enemy but end up firing 9 feet above him because there was a bloody picket fence in the way. Either that or your shells will fire way too short because your aiming reticule thought you were trying to fire at the island rather than behind it. There are a couple of more minor issues. The AA fire makes flying aircraft suicidal, the spawn costs are way too high considering that you also have repair costs, and you earn way too little from these matches. 2 aircraft kills in realistic mode earned me less than 1,000 silver lions, when those planes would have cost their pilots more than 12,000 each. A couple hundred lions for capturing zones or getting assists, and literally a couple dozen for critical hits. Secondary guns were spamming shells smack bang into an island because the AI could see a ship on the other side, and no one told the AI that they can't fire through 60 feet of rock with 100mm shells. The map layout also needs to be worked on, but I'll talk about that more in just a moment. High explosive shells seem to be glitchy, always flying miles past where you aimed them, and both AP and HE seem to deal damage incorrectly. The torpedoes were odd. These are the ones from the cruisers I'm talking about. Sometimes they'd tell you the tube was in a dead zone, but they'd fire off anyway. They'd fire off completely different directions to where you aimed them, and it was very difficult to tell where they were going to go without just firing them, despite the fact that there was a separate keybind to aim them but not fire them, and half the time you'd press this and they would just fire regardless. These, like I said, are more minor issues, and they can be tweaked without needing significant reworking to fix them, which I hope Gaijin does, as just fixing them would make the game a lot more fun already. And now for the final and possibly biggest problem, the game modes, or mode. With the current standing we have boats, destroyers and cruisers all in the same battle, but it doesn't really feel like that. The problem is that the game is defined by the 3 capture points that drain tickets, as always. While this game mechanic works okay for tank battles, it doesn't suit these naval conflicts. The map design has to allow for each of these types of naval vessels to be effective in their own right. If there were nothing but open water, then the boats would be worthless, but if there were nothing but cramped islands and close quarters estuaries, then the capital ships would be fish in a barrel, unable to escape the torpedo spam from the light attack boats. Because of this, there is a kind of progression across the map, with the left side comprising more open waters and more islands dotting the landscape, or seascape, as the map progresses left to right. The 3 capture points are placed in locations that vary in just how much island cover is provided, one in the cramped areas on the far right, one to the left of that but still on the right hand side of the map where the islands begin to thin out and destroyers come into their own, and one right in the middle with much less cover where the capital ships duke it out for control of the surrounding waters. This all sounds good, but the issue is that torpedo boats are the only things capping any points. They're small and fast enough to sneak in and cap whilst dodging shells from the cruisers and destroyers, and then get out again while attacking enemy torpedo boats and possibly even launching a torpedo salvo. Capital ships are far too conspicuous to do this. They rely on long-range combat, meaning that they might as well be in a separate match to the boats. They feel like they have very little influence over the battle, just being there to spam the skies with some more pretty tracer belts, while the boats feel like they're only there to fight each other, and the destroyers might as well be cruisers, or vice versa, like I said before, effectively. While destroyers, when they were first added, diversified the gameplay, interacting heavily with the boats, they now just fight the cruisers, and the boats are back to being the SPAA on water that they were originally, only now they're what decides the outcome of the battle for the capital ships, players that didn't even have anything to do with it. Effectively, they've become the bombers of air realistic battles. Your fighters might be beating the enemy teams into submission, but you'll lose the battle anyway because a bomber that never came within 10 kilometers of another player. Here, the boats are the bombers, and the capital ships are duking it out for effectively no reason. This could be fixed with some more and different game modes. Of course, the battles didn't always work out this way every time, so keeping the 3 cap games in rotation wouldn't be so bad. But what about double or single cap games? This would force teams or fleets to engage each other directly and to do it together, giving the different types of vessels some more obvious, unique and dynamic roles. The maps would have to be redesigned for this to work, with the archipelago covering the whole map, thicker clusters of islands in some areas, sure, but not just on one side, as this separates the ships too much. What about some asymmetrical modes, convoys, escorts, protect the aircraft carrier maybe, things like that? I think these would work really well and give cruisers a job to do. Having increased firepower over the smaller vessels doesn't help you capture a point. Being light, small and fast is the name of the game. It's the same reason why heavy fighters aren't usually so effective in air battles. A cruiser's benefits don't seem to weigh in on their ability to affect the match in War Thunder, but their negatives play a big role in reducing that effectiveness. This is partly to do with the gaming system preventing cruisers having the one-shot potential that they should, partly because of the map layout separating the ships too much, but mostly because the game's objectives don't rely on your raw firepower. However, if the objective was to kill the enemy team's carrier, then all of a sudden larger firepower is just as much of a bonus as mobility and speed. It would also just be really cool to see destroyers, cruisers and torpedo boats all travelling together, rather than, as I said before, feeling that they're part of a completely different match. Hell, maybe one day we could even have battleships and heavy cruisers too. Another interesting point is the brake mode. Now, I don't know about you, but this is something that I personally always hated getting in tank battles. In naval forces, however, it might actually work. The game would consist of PT boats being the front runners of the assault team, destroyers escorting them from slightly further behind, following them through their paths to engage the enemy from different angles, and cruisers would be the long-range support. Just some things to think about. Anyway, that is going to be it for this video. Please leave a like and subscribe if you enjoyed, as there will be new content out on my channel every single day. I've really enjoyed Naval Forces in Arcade this weekend. I feel like it combined the best parts of World of Warships and War Thunder together. I hope to be invited to the next naval test, and I look forward to seeing what work is done to the game mode in future. Please leave your thoughts on the cruisers, this weekend's test, and this video down in the comments. Come follow me over on Twitch, Twitter, Discord, and all the rest, links below. And as always, I'll see you lads next video. Oops. Okay, now we can push around. Anybody off to the right? I don't see anyone. Anybody? Ah, jeez! Right, one shot. That's a T-34. Gunner down. Oh god, don't look at me with that 105. Get out of here. Oh my god, did we just bounce that? Right, T-34. Time to go back to Gulag. We get that turret neck. Oh, it's not fair. It's not fair. It's a massacre. It's unstoppable.